A former friend of mine, whom I will refer to as Dave, called me a bad influence for being child-free. Today, he reached out with a surprising request that has left me feeling a whirlwind of emotions. This isn't a post where I'm looking for input on whether or not I handled things correctly. I am confident that I did. What I really need is to vent about this emotional day, knowing that people in the child-free community will understand my feelings. So, here's the situation. Dave, who I haven't spoken with in almost 3 years, suddenly contacted me out of the blue. He claims he is facing a home emergency and needs a place for himself, his wife, and their 3 children to stay while they deal with this issue. This is the same guy who, during one of the hardest periods of my life, decided that he couldn't be friends with me anymore because he believed my child-free lifestyle would negatively impact his kids. To provide some background, our friendship ended during a very turbulent time for me. I was dealing with immense stress and sadness, particularly with my father's illness and eventual passing. I reached out to Dave for comfort, only to hear him tell me that being child-free made me a bad influence on his family. He and his wife had 2 kids at the time, and he felt they were better off without me around, as I wasn't the kind of friend they valued anymore. This hurt deeply because Dave and I had shared so many good times over the years. We were friends from graduate school who enjoyed activities like rock climbing. Our group of friends regularly rented lake houses or lodges for all kinds of adventures throughout the seasons. We had a friendship that spanned over a decade, only to have it end because I didn't fit into his traditional family mold. I had been there for Dave when he faced tough times, like when he learned about his mom's cancer diagnosis and even during her funeral. So, to be pushed aside was incredibly painful, especially as I was enduring my own heartaches. Fast forward to today, and I see a text from Dave pop up on my phone. I never deleted his number since we hadn't spoken for so long, so his name was still there. He asked if I could let him and his family stay at my house due to an emergency with their water heater. He emphasized that it was urgent, and since I now live in the same city as him, it would be a huge favor. That message stirred up a lot of conflicting emotions in me. I couldn't help but think about how he had previously labeled me a bad influence and yet was now reaching out for help. His family has since grown, as he and his wife now have 3 kids, including a 5-month-old. When I asked him why he was coming to me of all people, he responded that he was out of options. He claimed that no one else had space for him and his 3 kids, particularly with the youngest being so small and needing special care. I asked why they couldn't just get a hotel room, and he explained that it would be too expensive. They were already facing significant medical debt due to their baby having to stay in the NICU after birth. While I expressed my sympathies, I still questioned why he thought I would help him. He mentioned that he had seen I previously assisted someone else in need last year, and figured I had the extra room to accommodate them now. I knew exactly whom he was talking about, but I wanted to clarify how that situation had been handled with more care and sensitivity. After all, it was a private matter shared by the couple. Just to provide some context, around that time last year, one of my good friends, Kate, who has lupus, ended up getting COVID-19 despite being cautious. Her condition made things complicated, leading to her being in the ICU, and her husband had to face the heart-wrenching decision of prioritizing her life over their pregnancy. All these memories flooded back as I processed Dave's message, reminding me of the complexities and circumstances of our lives. The unexpected nature of his request and the way he treated me before has left me feeling mixed emotions as I contemplate my next steps. The situation was dire when Kate faced the choice between her life and the life of her unborn child. The doctors had to make a difficult decision, either provide her with the urgent medical care she needed, which could jeopardize the fetus, or let her die without intervention. Fortunately, a compassionate doctor decided to prioritize Kate's health, allowing the medical team to focus on saving her life. Meanwhile, Kate's mother showed an alarming lack of support, suggesting that her daughter's life wasn't worth much anymore and even attempted to bring in a priest to administer last rites while Kate was in a coma. This shocking behavior created intense drama within the family. As a result of the turmoil, Kate's brother and his wife felt the need to escape their mother's toxic influence. They sought refuge and ended up staying with me for a couple of days since I had an extra room and was conveniently located near the hospital. Their situation was understandably stressful, given that they lived out of state and were facing the distress of their sister fighting for her life. Thankfully, Kate pulled through and managed to survive, but the experience left a lasting impact. She ultimately decided to cut ties with her mother, who had shown her so little care during one of the most challenging times in her life. Interestingly, while Kate was in her coma, she became aware of conversations happening around her, including those about the priest trying to come in. Meanwhile, I had welcomed her brother and his wife into my home because they have always been kind and supportive people. Unbeknownst to me, while I was off social media, either Kate's brother or his wife had shared how grateful they were for my help during such a difficult period. They expressed that my support had been a light in their dark time, and they communicated this appreciation to me in person. Fast forward to today, and I found myself in a complicated situation with Dave, a former friend. He had somehow remembered the kindness I showed Kate's family during their crisis and assumed that I would automatically extend the same hospitality to him and his family. He approached me with a plea for help, asking if he could stay with me due to a broken hot water heater at his home. I felt frustrated and angry that he would even think to ask, especially after he had previously critiqued my choice to live a child-free life, claiming it was a bad influence on his kids. I told him firmly that my decision to be child-free means I don't want kids staying in my home for long periods. I have my own life and my 2 cats, and I'm not about to turn my space into a makeshift hotel for his 3 children. He reacted by calling me selfish and insisted I think about his kids suffering without hot water. I pointed out that he needed to take responsibility for his own situation and suggested that he find a hotel rather than impose on me. He continued to make excuses, even mentioning their medical debt, but I remained firm. It seemed highly suspicious to me that a broken hot water heater would take an extended time to fix. I knew the laws in our state, and I wasn't going to risk having them claim tenant rights just because they stayed with me for too long. After a heated exchange, he resorted to threatening me with social media, claiming he would tell everyone how I was refusing to help his family in their time of need. I stood my ground, telling him it didn't matter because I'm not active on Facebook, and I didn't care what people thought of me. I reminded him that he hadn't been a true friend for years and that he didn't even know my address, just that I lived nearby. I made it clear that if he wanted to blast me on social media, it wouldn't impact my life. I told him that if he shared this with mutual friends, they would laugh at him for trying to manipulate me. I also had all the texts saved that showed how he had spoken to me, painting a clear picture of the friendship we once had. I expressed sorrow for his struggles but also highlighted that he needed to reflect on the way he treated people. I feel a deep sense of regret that he has chosen this path in life. It's clear to me that he must be experiencing a great deal of unhappiness and turmoil, which is truly unfortunate. However, I have to prioritize my own well-being, and his presence in my life has become a negative influence that I can no longer tolerate. I believe he will ultimately understand my decision, especially since he has expressed similar feelings towards me in the past. I remember the last conversation we had. It escalated quickly, leading to a point where I had to block him to protect myself from his negativity. The whole situation saddens me deeply, especially when I consider how different he was a decade ago. Back then, he was a decent person, someone with whom I could share good times. I also remember his mother, who was such a lovely woman and played a positive role in his life. Now, I find myself steeling myself against the potential backlash from his friends or family, the so-called flying monkeys, who might try to guilt me into helping him or taking on responsibilities that should not fall on me. I'll be ready to tell them that they should take responsibility for him themselves. I've already discussed this troubling situation with my 2 closest friends, both of whom were taken aback by Dave's boldness. They found it hard to believe that he would have the audacity to demand a place in my home, especially considering his past actions. One of my friends even mentioned that her water heater broke recently, but she managed to have a plumber come out the same day, and they fixed it within a day. To her, the idea of refusing a hotel stay was a huge red flag. We all agree that something about this situation feels off, and it sparked our curiosity to know the whole story. Despite the sadness associated with this situation, I feel a sense of righteousness in the choice I made. I know, deep down, that I did the right thing by setting boundaries. It pains me to think that a previous kindness I extended toward him was later weaponized against me. In the past, I even wondered if he was right when he called me a bad influence, particularly during my bouts of depression. Society often shuns those who are down, thinking that sad people bring everyone else down. However, with some clarity now, I recognize that he possesses a flawed character, and it has reopened old and painful memories that I had thought I moved past. In providing this update, I find myself grateful to those who took the time to read my last post and share their support. The community has been incredibly kind, with not a single troll in sight, which feels like a small miracle on this platform. I'm sipping on a warm pot of tea as I write this, and I suggest you do the same because there's a lot to unpack here. As I continue, I can confirm that my instincts were correct about the broken water heater being a poorly conceived excuse for needing housing. Surprisingly, it turns out that Dave never had a water heater in the first place. It was all a fabrication. He and his wife, Shelley, have been staying in a hotel with their children instead. They had sold their house 6 months ago and were attempting to find a larger home since then. So, at this very moment, as I type this, they are already settled in a hotel and have access to all the hot water they could need. Now, my sister, who lives in a different time zone, has been conducting her own investigation into Dave's situation. She has a knack for uncovering details about people, something I appreciate. Armed with the information I provided her, including Dave's full name, his former address, and details about his family, she went to work. She discovered that his house had sold for a significant profit, far beyond what it was purchased for years ago, reflective of the current seller's market. Yet, despite the sale, it appears that they haven't purchased a new property. Once I heard what my sister found, I couldn't wait to share it with my friends. I told them how Dave had sold his house but seemed to have done nothing with the proceeds, leaving me puzzled about his real intentions. It seems that Dave has sold his house and the issue he claimed to have with a water heater isn't actually valid since he currently doesn't own a water heater. This situation left my friends confused, prompting a reaction of disbelief, with one friend, Allison, reaching out to my sister for more information. Concerned that Dave might be trying to deceive me, my sister decided to investigate further. Allison, who was a classmate of mine and Dave's during our graduate studies over a decade ago, didn't have a close relationship with him at that time. However, she was still one of his Facebook friends, which is a testament to the way people connect on social media. Many individuals tend to friend anyone they have even the slightest connection with. Around the same time I received an update from Kate's brother and sister-in-law, who had stayed with me while Kate was in the hospital. It was Kate's sister-in-law, Laura, who had publicly expressed her gratitude for my kindness on Facebook. She also confirmed that she had shared some pictures, one featuring my cat looking quite authoritative and another showcasing my prized monster, a delicious plant, which she adored. The details in those images hinted at a well-kept home with a spacious kitchen and an impressive pantry. This context would later become important. I filled Laura in on the situation regarding Dave, and she was horrified at the thought that she might have inadvertently contributed to the reasons behind his desire to enter my home. To mitigate any potential misunderstanding, she promptly removed the post that mentioned me, untagged my name, and even provided me with a screenshot to confirm this action. Laura also asked if there was anything else she could do to help. I mentioned that my sister was conducting a thorough investigation and might welcome her assistance, so I connected them. Interestingly, Laura also reached out to Allison, seemingly out of the blue. Later that morning, I received a request from Allison asking for screenshots of the exact moment in the text exchanges where Dave claimed his emergency was related to the water heater. He used this as his reason for needing help with his family and kids for a few days. I sent her the information she asked for, but after that, there was a long stretch of silence throughout the day, leaving me curious about what was happening. By early evening, I finally got more of the story through texts from my sister, Allison, and Laura. To clarify what happened, I will outline the key points. 6 months ago, Dave and his wife, Shelley, sold their house because they wanted more space and additional bedrooms for their 3 children. They were eager to upgrade, especially since the housing market was booming and their home had accrued significant equity since their purchase. They were excited to list it on the market, aiming for a high sale price, and decided to sell without any conditions that would require them to buy another house first. Dave was confident that with a substantial profit from the sale, they would quickly find a new home. Their house sold rapidly, attracting multiple bids, which Dave proudly touted. However, once they began searching for a new place, the process turned out to be more challenging than anticipated. Every offer they made on a potential new home was outbid by others. When the time came for the new buyers to take possession of their former home, Dave and Shelley had to vacate. They thought this would not be a serious problem, as a friend of theirs had agreed to let them stay temporarily while they continued house hunting. Despite their ongoing search, they were consistently outbid on every property. Dave and Shelley remained adamant about not lowering their expectations or adjusting their budget. They refused to consider homes that were the same size as their previous one, which was the main reason they sold in the first place. Despite their ongoing struggles, Dave was not willing to increase their budget. Complicating matters further, their 3rd child was born prematurely and required care in the neonatal intensive care unit, leading to additional medical expenses. This situation made Dave even more hesitant to spend beyond their means or take out loans. As a result, Dave, Shelley, and their 3 children found themselves temporarily staying with another friend. They continued their home search without success, ultimately moving in with a 3rd person while still looking for a permanent residence. At this point, others began suggesting that it might be wise for them to wait out the current housing market, hoping for a time when it would become more favorable to buyers. The housing market isn't in their favor right now, and they face challenges in finding an apartment. Dave dismisses the idea of renting an apartment because he believes that the monthly payment would be similar to a mortgage. For him, if he's going to spend that much on living arrangements, he'd rather put that money towards a mortgage. He views paying for an apartment as an unnecessary expense that drains their finances. Shelley, on the other hand, becomes even more frustrated by the thought of moving into an apartment. She dislikes the idea of living in a space that is smaller than their previous home. Meanwhile, the situation with Dave's family is becoming increasingly uncomfortable. It seems that they have overstayed their welcome, leading to growing annoyance among those around them. Dave and Shelley are reluctant to contribute to the household expenses, particularly groceries, which has strained relationships. In fact, Dave's family is now at the bottom of the list when it comes to people willing to offer them free housing. Just a month ago, they had a range of options, but all of those choices have dried up as others in their circle need space for their own visiting family during the holidays. The freeloaders are quickly running out of options. Shelley, who works as a school teacher in the city, feels the pressure of the situation even more as the school year has begun again. She and Dave realize that they must remain in the city for their jobs and the education of their children. Unfortunately, the only remaining possibilities for free housing are Dave's brother, who lives 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither option is suitable for their jobs or convenient for getting the kids to in-person classes, which makes their need for housing urgent. As a result, they opt to book a hotel, which adds to their frustration. Living in a hotel with their kids is challenging, as the children can be loud, and hotel staff has been asking them to keep the noise down. Both Dave and Shelley often express their dislike for this hotel living situation. They feel it's unfair that they cannot find a house despite having enough money. To clarify, their financial situation is stable enough to afford an extended hotel stay, even though it's still much pricier than renting an average apartment. Dave has a slightly positive view of the hotel, appreciating the flexibility it offers since they are not tied down to a lease and can leave whenever they want. He also enjoys the benefit of hotel services. However, Shelley often laments about the situation, saying that the kids are sad without a backyard to play in, which prevents them from enjoying childhood the way they should. In a different turn of events, Shelley has been caught in a social media drama. Allison goes back through Shelley's posts and discovers a moment from the beginning of the pandemic when there was a major rush for supplies. During that time, people were buying excessive amounts of toilet paper and food due to panic buying, creating shortages on shelves. One of Allison's old friends from grad school reached out, seemingly to check in on her, but the real motive was to ask for food. The friend knew Allison had a well-stocked pantry and a chest freezer filled with food, a practice passed down from her grandmother who lived through World War II. This friend requested that Allison share some of her food because she claimed that her child was a picky eater and couldn't find suitable meals. This surprised Allison, who found it audacious that someone would ask her for food simply because she was single and didn't have kids to feed. She pointed out that it wasn't a true food shortage, rather, it was caused by panic buying. Allison suggested that if her friend really needed food, there were food banks available to help. When she refused to give away her food, the friend called her selfish and vented about it on social media to others, including some spouses of their mutual grad school friends. Now, getting back to Shelley's posts, it turns out she supports the friend who asked Allison for help and also considers Allison selfish for not offering assistance. Shelley thinks it's odd that Allison has so much food for just herself and suggests she might have some underlying issues. It seems the negativity might have been influenced by Dave's wife, as Allison suspects that Laura's comments about her generosity are part of the trouble brewing within their circle. When Laura shared a post about my kindness in letting a couple stay at my place for a few days while they figured out a long-term hotel situation during Kate's hospitalization, it sparked quite a reaction. Shelley commented on how sweet it was of me to help them out and also mentioned how lovely my home looked. This situation is just one piece of a larger network of friendships that can seem a bit complicated at first glance. Most of us met during grad school, which was a challenging time. We used to relieve stress by planning vacations together, long before many of us got married or had kids. I always made it a point to include my close college friends who lived nearby in these group trips. We'd all pitch in, renting lakeside houses or cabins at ski resorts to enjoy some quality time together. Recently, Shelley has been quite vocal about how tough it has been for her kids without a backyard to play in, expressing that living in a hotel just doesn't allow children to be kids. However, just 2 days ago, she posted something that seemed a bit strange, suggesting that her family had finally found a cute place to live where her kids could escape the hotel life. She even mentioned that the new home has a great kitchen for her children. In the midst of all this, I received a text from Dave, someone I hadn't heard from in 3 years. He claimed his water heater was broken and asked if I could take in his family for a few days while it got fixed. It was an obvious no from me. After my refusal, I noticed some passive-aggressive comments from Dave and Shelley on social media, bemoaning how terrible society has become when friends refuse to help families in need. Shelley expressed sadness about her cute home situation falling through and received a lot of sympathy from her friends. This caught the attention of Allison, who asked for screen grabs of Dave's water heater excuse. She got fired up and started posting and sharing the details, revealing that Dave and Shelley didn't even have a new housing arrangement lined up. They had been trying to take advantage of my good nature to gain a place to stay by fabricating a story about plumbing issues that I never agreed to. Laura backed Allison up, calling them out for their attempts to manipulate the situation. Allison also reminded everyone about how Dave had previously insulted me and implied I was a bad influence on his family because of my child-free lifestyle. This resonated with many because Allison herself is child-free. People quickly chimed in, criticizing Dave for being unkind and then expecting favors. It escalated to a point where others labeled him as cheap and a leech. Those who had let his family stay at their homes during the last 6 months started speaking up too, sharing unpleasant stories about how messy and ill-mannered his kids had been and how much extra effort they had to put in to clean up after them. It was almost a relief when they finally left. Many expressed anger that Dave and Shelley would try to pull a fast one on me and then twist the narrative to make me look like the bad guy online. Some people I hadn't spoken to in a while came forward to remind Dave how I had been a good person and had helped them out during grad school. It was heartening to hear those words, especially when others noted how I had assisted people in finding jobs, something much more constructive than what Dave had ever done. I have always been active in the grad school networking community, sharing job opportunities and guidance on navigating scientific careers. Even Dave's own brother reached out, expressing his disgust at Dave's behavior and recalling how much I had done to help out after their mother passed away. He remarked that she would be turning in her grave if she knew how he was treating people now. My sister eventually set up a Zoom call with me, sharing her screen to show me the chaos surrounding this whole situation. This may illustrate why I tend to keep my distance from certain people. I never received a single message from anyone about not letting a family into my home. I was fully expecting to be bombarded with messages, like I was facing a squad of flying monkeys, but that never happened. It was surprising and kind of unbelievable. Dave, of all people, told me he would blast my name all over Facebook, but in the end, he ended up taking a hit himself. How ridiculous is that? It's almost comical when you think about it. I even have texts from him where he lied about the water heater situation. I guess he thought that since I wasn't on social media, I wouldn't find out he was lying or realize that he was happily enjoying hot water in a hotel while trying to play me for a fool. I truly feel like I dodged a missile aimed right at me. After work, I had to pour myself a drink and really think about all of this. It was a lot to process. As I considered the context of everything, it hit me that Dave and Shelley were probably planning to squat in my home. He got really defensive when I brought up the 7-day rule, which gives tenants rights in our state. That raised a huge red flag for me. Everyone had warned me that something wasn't right, and they were spot on. It dawned on me that Dave was just a cheap guy who didn't want to spend extra money on a hotel. He also seemed too lazy to look for an apartment. He had already burned through all his connections for free housing with friends. I was just a last resort for him. Shelley, his wife, had a peripheral understanding that I was friendly towards guests. She also knew my home was nice, with plenty of food available for her kids. However, she and Dave had a reputation for consuming everything in sight. If they stayed with me for even a week, they'd probably start to feel like tenants, and I would inevitably have to deal with the hassle of eviction, which could take months. It's much easier to pull a scam on a single person like me than to try that same stunt with their actual friends who have kids and limited space. Dave was simply looking to stay somewhere for free so he could funnel all his money into purchasing a larger house once he sold his old one. I can't say for sure, but it all adds up. So, in a moment of clarity, I decided to send him one last text. I unblocked his number just long enough to get my point across before blocking him again. I wrote, "Hey Dave, I found out you were lying about that water heater. You don't even have one, you're living in a hotel while sitting on a pile of cash from selling your old home. It's pretty awful that you lied to me and tried to nest in my space, especially after you ruined our friendship when you called me a bad influence on your family. I didn't say it before, but I'm saying it now, you're trash. Your mom would be ashamed of you. I see now that it's all projection since you're the real bad influence, not just in my life but in others' lives too. If you genuinely believed I was a bad influence, you wouldn't have tried to get your family into my home this week. If you still think I'm a bad influence, then don't worry about me helping you out or doing you any favors in the future. I'm going to keep my so-called bad influence far away from your family. By the way, it sounds like Shelley is quite the treat these days. The last thing I want to say is that you need to act like a responsible husband and father. You ought to pay for a stable apartment for your family instead of playing these freeloader games. Here's a link to our local Craigslist housing page, I'm sure you'll find something on there. And hey, I hope to see you at the next in-person alumni gathering. It will be interesting to catch up, for sure." So that was it. I got everything off my chest. Everyone was right, Something was definitely going on behind the scenes. I feel really sick about how someone could even think about trying to pull this on me. It's unsettling to imagine what could have happened if I had let them into my home. Thank goodness I didn't. That would have turned into a nightmare. Former friend who called me a bad influence for being child-free just demanded today.